Władziu Valentino Liberace, known simply as Liberace, was one of the most dazzling and unforgettable entertainers of the 20th century. Born in 1919 to Polish and Italian immigrant parents in Wisconsin, USA, he grew up in a household where music was both discipline and escape. A piano prodigy, he performed with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra at just 16. But classical music alone couldn't contain his imagination. He blended popular tunes with classical flourishes, wrapped them in humour and charm, and created a style that audiences had never seen before. By the 1950s, Liberace was a household name. His television show, his concerts, and his flamboyant persona made him one of the highest paid performers in the world. He didn't just play the piano, he performed it. Sequined capes, mirrored pianos, fur coats with enormous trains, and a stage presence that sparkled as brightly as his costumes turned every show into a spectacle. Critics often dismissed him as excessive, but audiences adored him. His influence can still be seen today in artists who blend music with theatricality, such as Elton John to Lady Gaga.
That's the way Boogie Woogie started out, with the left hand playing down there all by itself. And someone came along and thought it would be a good idea if the right hand could do something. And then it began to sound like this. And along came a variation. They call this one the walking bass boogie woogie. It walked back and forth like this. This next part is what they call a boogie woogie break. And you'll notice right in the middle, I stop playing for a moment. And that's because there isn't any music for that part. Hey! You know, every time I play that little break, it seems to bring out something out of certain people in the audience. And this time, if you feel the urge to shout, hey, just let it out. Want to do it again, don't you? I got an idea. Let's have the ladies do it all by themselves this time, okay? Okay, fellas, now it's your turn. You know, it's all this fun to do boogie woogie with only 8 beats in the bar. I'd like you to hear a little invention of my own. It has 16 beats in the bar.
Behind the glamour, however, Liberace lived with contradictions. He fiercely guarded his private life, especially in an era when homosexuality was heavily stigmatized. Despite his flamboyant public persona, he repeatedly denied rumours about his sexuality, even suing newspapers that suggested he may be gay. His relationship with Scott Thorson later became the centre of a highly publicised palimony lawsuit, exposing personal details that clashed with the image he had carefully maintained. Those who knew him often described him as warm, generous, and surprisingly humble away from the spotlight. He supported charities, encouraged young musicians, and remained close to his family. Yet he also lived with the pressures of fame, secrecy, and the fear of being exposed in a time when being openly gay could destroy a career. In the 1980s, Liberace's health began to decline. He continued performing as long as he could, even as his body weakened. He died in 1987 at the age of 67. The official cause was pneumonia resulting from AIDS, a fact that was initially concealed by his management, reflecting the stigma of the time. Liberace's legacy is complex and enduring. He was a virtuoso who made classical music accessible, a showman who embraced excess with a wink, and a cultural icon whose life reflects both the constraints and the courage of his era. His influence continues to shine in the artists who dare to be bold, theatrical, and unapologetically themselves.
(1987). A hearse is escorted by a police helicopter from Los Angeles towards the desert town of Palm Springs. Inside is the body of a man who was once the highest-grossing entertainer in America. The body has been seized by the authorities. Against the wishes of his family, they're going to conduct an autopsy. What they find will finally destroy his public image and expose the carefully constructed lie that has sustained his career. It is the body of Liberace. Liberace was a huge star. His lavish act broke records for popularity on stage and television, and his female fans idolized him with the passion of love-struck teens.
I love this man, his music, the classical music, the popular music, his humility. To me, he has a beautiful soul, a genuine human being.
There was two completely different personalities. On stage, he's in control. He's a ladies' man. He walks with a brisk step. He's everything. He's the perfect man. This was the perfect creation that he created. Liberace, off stage, he was very quiet, shy, walks almost with a shuffle, and he was gay.
Hiding his homosexuality became his lifelong battle. The private Liberace leaned to his friends, reshaped the world around him, ornaments for his houses, surgery for his lover.
I was created in his own image. Liberace told the doctor, I want you to create Scott to look like me.
Liberace was obsessed with his legacy as a musician, but he is remembered not for what he played, but for his extravagant showmanship and the scandals he tried to hide.
Every time I wear this, I think of what Mae West once said when she said, "Too much of a good thing is wonderful."
Władziu Valentino Liberace, a boy whose young life was dominated by his mother. Angry and disappointed after a bitter divorce from the boy's Italian father, the Polish Mrs. Liberace lived humbly in Milwaukee. Since his birth in 1919, Władziu had been a shy, delicate boy with a speech impediment. His dazzling skills on the piano were all he had to impress his school friends. The young man was acclaimed as a prodigy. In 1940, when he was 21, he was invited to play as a guest soloist with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra when they visited his hometown. But Liberace would never find out if he had the talent to make it as a classical performer. Encouraged by his older brother George, he started making money playing ragtime and popular tunes around the nightclubs of Wisconsin. And the need for cash took him to New York and a living playing piano in hotel lounges. (1945), and the 26-year-old got his first big break, playing in Las Vegas, a desert town booming for one good reason: legal gambling. The Vegas casinos quickly noted the effect his handsome, boyish looks had on women. Liberace was good for business.
Well, he brought whole families, because if the women said, we're going to go see Liberace, even if the men didn't go, then they were free to go gamble.
And I went down to see him, and I looked at the audience, and they were sitting there, mesmerized, like this. I said, I said, this guy's got something going, see? Well, after he played about less than 2 numbers, I said, I heard enough. I like this man. I like what he does. So the next morning, I called up my partner. I signed an artist. He said, what kind of artist? I signed a fellow by the name of Liberace, who plays fantastic piano, good-looking man, and so forth. And then he said, what the f can we do with a pianist? How are you going to make a star out of a piano player?
What he could do with a piano player was try him out in an exciting, experimental little industry that some said would soon change the face of entertainment in America: TV. The young medium's producers knew what they were looking for. Someone who didn't just play well in nightclubs and theaters, someone who could beam charm direct to an audience in their homes.
If it's August, December, or June, for my heart sings a wonderful tune. As long
Television was a new medium at that time, so there were no rules and no, this is the way you do it. So they were actually creating it, and actually Liberace, I think, created that talking directly to the camera as if the camera was a person.
Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen.
His manager drove him around Beverly Hills, and he said, now look around at all these homes. And he said, okay. So, and then he drove him out to the San Fernando Valley, which is a kind of a working class neighborhood, which is over the hills from Beverly Hills. And he said, now look at these houses. What do you see different here than what you saw in Beverly Hills? And Lee said, well, I'm not sure. The houses were bigger and nicer. He said, no, it's something else. And then Lee said, oh yeah, the TV antennas. Every house in the valley had a TV antenna, but no one in Beverly Hills did. And so his manager said to him, that's your audience.
Liberace had assembled an image. From a popular film about Chopin, A Song to Remember, came the candelabra. Now it was surname only, in the style of a maestro. And in came the smile that electrified the living rooms of the 1950s. Liberace loved the lens. Viewers were accustomed to something much more formal, but Liberace flirted and beamed at the camera like no one before. The audience was bewitched.
My grandmother first saw Liberace. She was elderly. She had never seen TV before. She thought he was really real and he could really see her. And she had a weekly date with Liberace. She had to get dressed up, put on her best makeup, her lipstick, her earrings, her pearls. She was in love with Liberace, and she was convinced that he could see her on TV. And it was like a very personal thing with her. She never missed her weekly Sunday date with Liberace. And I think there probably were a lot of other little old ladies in the United States who felt that way about Liberace, too. For my grandmother, television was actually an erotic adventure. She had a boyfriend. His name was Liberace. He came every Sunday.
In 1954, the Liberace show could be found on 179 channels across the USA. One New York station, WPIX, reran his show 10 times a week. Advertisers were still skeptical about this gimmick called TV. Liberace knew his show would stand or fall by its ability to bring in the big bucks from commercial sponsors.
How did they greet you when you went in there to open up that new account? See? See, they were smiling, see? Real friendly service, that's what they're always talking about, and believe me, it's really so. We saw it happen. And we're very, very happy to be associated with such very friendly people as those that run the Citizens National Bank.
$600,000 of new deposits at the bank sent a clear message. Liberace had magic. Now he was performing with the top stars of the day.
Move that way a little bit. You're standing in front of my candelabra.
A smile and a candelabra had turned a talented but not brilliant pianist into a universally marketable phenomenon of the TV age.
Mr. Jack Benny.
For the next 30 years, his trademarks would sizzle indelibly through popular culture.
I wish my brother George was here.
George and Mom, the most important props of all. The family were ever present, paraded in the stage show as part of the act. With his brother and his mother around him, his beaming, prancing stage persona wasn't so much sexual as prepubescent. He was the eternal small boy. In their new home, Mom and her children lived together in perfectly presented, opulent bliss.
Hello, Mom.
Hello, son.
Amid the newfound grandeur, Mother developed some secret habits.
A couple times she was caught shoplifting at a Ralph's, at a supermarket, and they'd call Uncle Lee and say, you know, we don't want this in the paper, but we have your mother here that's taking things.
And in turn, Mom did not approve of Liberace's habit of bringing home hillbillies, the good-looking male friends who would sunbathe in their swimming trunks around to a blousy nightclub singer.
And even Liberace smiled.
He used to tell it as it was a heterosexual encounter. He lost his virginity at the age of 16, some female customer in one of these honky-tonks. But other people heard the same story told as a homosexual encounter. But it's clear from a number of accounts and a number of other sources that Liberace started having sex with men when he was still a teenage boy.
In fact, I was reading about lovely young Princess Margaret. And she's looking for her dream man, too. And I'd like to meet her very much because I think we have a lot in common. We have the same taste and in the theater and music. And besides, she's pretty and she's single.
Well, I will have to look around until the right girl I have found.
In 1953, he came up with a fiancée.
My mother was absolutely serious. You know, she believed that he was straight, and she believed that he really cared for her.
I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad. She was a pearl.
My My mother believed that he loved her, she loved him, and she thought that they were going to get married. And never thought that he was using her for publicity.
Joanne Rio was a dancer and aspiring actress who lived across the road from Liberace. The couple were seen together at all the right concerts and parties, and when the engagement was announced, the papers couldn't get enough of the story. But the fans were inconsolable.
Headline, first kiss with Liberace, you know. Well, you know what that did? It brought in tons of mail from all the fans that loved him. You know, he was really the idol of the girls, the women of the world.
I feel sorry for your mother. Now she will have to share the adoration you give her.
How can you think of marriage? You belong to us.
Your appeal is the fact that you're single. If you have to get married, pick a plain type, not a glamour girl.
Liberace heard about the tons of mail from all the fans, and he said, Seymour, I've got to call off my association with this girl.
Liberace was just the showman, and the strings were being pulled by his management and the people around him, and he allowed that to go on. And so when he broke up with my mother, it wasn't Liberace that made the call, it was Seymour Heller, the manager.
He said, Seymour, I can't talk to her. I'm upset about this. Please, you tell her. So, listen, I'm his manager, and I love the man. I did it.
Do I think that he really ever had intentions of marrying her? No, I don't. I think she believed that, but I think that at that time, he had never been involved with a woman, so this was perfect, you know, to use my mother. She was young, naive, pretty, and let it go as far as it could.
On the platform at Southampton are one or two music lovers who just happened to be passing by on their way from London to London and thought they might as well make sure he knew which train to catch. The train is labelled Liberace Special, so fortunately there's not much chance of a mistake.
1956. Liberace was now a transatlantic superstar. His arrival at the start of a European tour whipped fans into a frenzy. But there were many in Britain, and older men in particular, who found the whole spectacle revolting.
I think when Liberace arrived in Waterloo, some of the British public just weren't ready for him. You know, we're quite used to this sort of flamboyance of show business these days, but show business then wasn't like that. There was an awful lot of people who were earning a crust out of doing bird impersonations or, you know, ventriloquism on the radio.
William Connor was 50, and the celebrated author of his own highly opinionated Daily Mirror column, Cassandra. The barnstorming article in which he vented his disgust was to lead to the High Court for a libel trial the like of which Britain had never seen.
He is the summit of sex, the pinnacle of masculine, feminine, and neuter, everything that he, she, and it can ever want. This deadly, winking, sniggering, snuggling, chromium-plated, scent-impregnated, luminous, quivering, giggling, fruit-flavored, mincing, ice-covered heap of mother love is the biggest sentimental vomit of all time.
Liberace sued for libel. At the High Court in London, cheering fans jostled newspapermen, chasing the story that had everything: fame, glamour, and a whiff of sex. Liberace claimed that the article had damaged his career. The case hinged on one detail. Had Cassandra implied Liberace was homosexual? And for aspiring British entertainers who had worked with Liberace, it was a chance to step into the witness box and the limelight.
The one sentence I was permitted to utter in its entirety was, "There is nothing suggestive or improper in Mr. Liberace's act."
Cross-examined about his unmanliness, Liberace gave a performance of high comedy.
Do you use scent or scented lotion? I use after-shaving lotions and underarm deodorants. And are they scented? Yes. When you come into a room at a press conference, does a noticeable odor come with you? I would not say it is an odor, I would say it is a scent of good grooming, that I smell clean and fresh. I always smell clean and fresh. I've noticed the smell of the press many times.
It was a piece of theatre. There was Lee taking full advantage of the spotlight. There was his famous counsel strutting around the court like an enormous peacock, using his huge voice to fill the court. It all comes back to me now as being something out of Gilbert and Sullivan.
The case gripped the country. To be homosexual was still a custodial offence. And this was the first time that many newspapers had even printed the word. When the direct question came, Liberace's denial was absolute.
Are you a homosexual? No, sir. Have you ever indulged in homosexual practices? No, sir, never in my life. I am against the practice because it offends convention and it offends society.
The verdict was not totally unexpected. The verdict was that it had been libelous, that damages should be awarded and that costs should be awarded. The damages were set at £8,000. The costs were set at £27,000, which was punitive at the time.
For Liberace, it was a Pyrrhic victory. He had denied his own sexuality under oath, and now he could never concede he was gay. Following Cassandra's article, his career would be punctuated with legal skirmishes over his sex life. One lawsuit helped to close down the Hollywood gossip sheet, Confidential.
I am going to file a $25 million libel suit against Confidential magazine. However, there is no price that can be placed on a person's reputation.
And so the glittering showman was preserved for his unique army of adoring fans. And the girls who fell hardest of all were all of a certain age.
To dream the impossible dream.
I love his music, but him as a person is just perfect. In my eyes, he's a perfect person.
He's a marvellous performer, a marvellous personality he's got. When we meet him, well, he really likes us all. We love him all. We love him so much that you can't help it.
To reach the unreachable star.
You will notice that throughout the history of show business, whenever there's been a really high camp performer, older women in particular find it terribly attractive. They saw in him something slightly exciting and yet not threatening.
Let me show. It's a candelabra, and that other thing is a watch. It's shaped like a piano. See it? It's gorgeous. That's a big stone. I love it. It's nice to have a big one if you have a choice, isn't it? Yeah, it's gorgeous. My stones aren't large, but I didn't have to do anything to get mine.
I guess it's no surprise that an elderly lady might be easily charmed, shall we say, not exactly seduced, but, you know, charmed by this gentleman who's so handsome and so pleasant and so unlike their own sons and husbands.
Liberace perfected his own low-brow, high-octane cocktail of syrupy banter, cut-down classics, and tinkly pop. Camp, in an era when no one had any idea what camp was. He drew the crowds in the same quantities as Sinatra and Elvis. But were they the same quality?
A Liberace audience would be more Midwestern. They would, a lot more polyester. You wouldn't have any $700 suits at a Liberace audience. You would at a Sinatra audience. Liberace was never hip.
And yet, when his Las Vegas salary topped $50,000 a week at the end of the 1950s, Liberace became the highest-grossing entertainer in the world. For 20 years in a row, his salary never dropped below $5 million a year. He was the perfect parody of luxury and excess.
I
love to eat and my weight constantly fluctuates. So most of my suits come in 3 sizes: thin, fat, and impossible.
Costumes cost up to $300,000.
You've got a beautiful audience. Bless you. But now I must fly.
His look was halfway between concert and circus.
Mary Poppins, eat your heart out.
But the critics detested Liberace. For them, he was the man who'd stripped the class out of classical music.
Ladies and gentlemen, Liberace.
Liberace's real genius was in single-handedly pioneering his rampantly flamboyant on-stage look. But when he claimed he was influential, he was greeted with cheerful laughter.
And Elvis Presley and people like that started copying me. You know, they began wearing it. Heavenly days, am I dreaming?
There were ever-popular stunts and cameos on film and TV. But being the nation's glittering clown won Liberace love, but not respect.
Everything's set for tonight's caper.
Of course.
Tiny radio transmitter hooked up inside your criminal piano?
Naturally.
It should be a pretty good haul.
I tell you what is a clue to Lee's fragility of he had very low self-esteem, I think, in many respects. I think he'd grown up with people who hadn't really furnished him with much admiration, which is why he'd manufactured his persona in order to put the persona out on the stage and not have to go out there himself. And so the showman was born purely in order to hide behind. And a key to this is the enormous lengths to which he would go to make you like him. When he first came to the ATV studios at Boreham Wood to make a series for this country and mainly for America, he walked around the set continually, introducing himself to people and asking about themselves, and using a mnemonic system, which is based upon Corinda's amazing memory system, in order to memorize their names. And he called everybody by their names and inquired after their children by name and their wives by name. And there were 200 people working there.
Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Liberace.
4 years later, he came back to do 2 specials for ATV. And the first thing he did was walk around the studio 4 years later and call everybody by name and ask after their children and their wives by name. And you can't imagine what effect that had on the morale of the people there. There wasn't anyone in that studio who didn't go, what a hell of a guy.
He had the wealth of a superstar, but inspired none of the awe that went with his status. He felt uncomfortable in the glamorous haunts of the stars, insecure about his legacy. In 1981, he visited Lord Montagu's National Motor Museum at Beaulieu.
It was all rather like covering a royal visit. Liberace, that self-styled king of the ivories, had come to Beaulieu. It was hard to say who was enjoying himself the most, Liberace, his host Lord Montagu, or the singer Michael Jackson, who had also popped in for lunch and a spin in a Rolls-Royce.
In the car with Michael Jackson and Liberace at Beaulieu was a blonde teenager called Scott Thorson. Scott had been working as a dog handler in the film industry when he met Liberace. Swiftly, he became the most prominent figure in the entourage.
He thought a lot of Scott. Scott was youthful, full of fun, kept you laughing all the time. So he really was. He was happy with Scott.
Scott was to come closer than anyone else to destroying Liberace's career. He was also the love of his life.
For my 21st birthday, Lee brought this huge box out. And I opened that box up. There was another little box. I opened that box up, there was another box. I opened that box up, there was a little box. I opened that box up, there was a little tiny box. And then finally he says, open that. And I opened that, and it was keys to a Rolls Royce. And outside of the casino in Las Vegas on Shirley Street, it was all wrapped up in tissue paper with a big bow, was the gold Rolls Royce. I mean, he was so generous. I mean, whatever I wanted, I got. I mean, he called me the prince, and he once told me, very interesting, he says, "You have the most important job in my organization." I says, "Well, what's that?" And he says, "To keep me happy."
On stage, Liberace used Scott as his chauffeur. And at home, he was placed at the center of the private world that Liberace had created. Now in his 60s, Liberace had decorated his opulent homes as shrines in his own cult. He decided his teenage lover, too, could be remade in his image. All it took was vision and a plastic surgeon.
There was a doctor by the name of Dr. Jack Startz. And one day, Lee brought him into his bedroom, and there was a picture of Lee, a young picture, and he says, "I want you to create Scott to look like me." And they did the chin implants and the high cheekbones. I had a nose job. He loved it.
Scott, he kept after Lee to go and have his eyes fixed, which Lee did. And to me, it didn't turn out like it should.
Scott was eager that Liberace, too, should have his face reshaped by Dr. Startz. But Scott also had his own reasons for wanting to stay in touch with the doctor, who always had a ready supply of pharmaceutical cocaine.
He had the facelift done in Dr. Startz's office. And I was there, and I'll never forget it. Dr. Startz had right next to the surgery table, had a glass of vodka, and he was snorting pharmaceutical cocaine. And he was doing surgery on Lee. And I had a name for Lee. I called him Boober. And he says, "Talk to him." I says, "Boober." He says, "Yeah." I says, "How you doing?" "Oh, fine." And basically, he ruined Lee's face. I mean, his eyes became very slanted. When Lee didn't have his toupee on, it was horrible scars up through his hairline. One night I walked in, I'll never forget, we were at the Las Vegas Hilton performing, and Lee was sitting there, and his eyes were wide open, and I thought, oh my God, he died. He was sound asleep. But his eyes were wide open because he couldn't shut them.
The drugs Scott had begun taking after his surgery had started a habit. To Liberace's dismay, he was mixing cocaine and quaaludes in ever larger quantities, becoming moody and erratic and often hallucinating.
He was on that stuff. And he came over here one day, and when he was walking up the steps, I was standing at the door, and he says, "Come here, Gladys. See all those people walking on top of Lou's house? Nobody there, you know." So I said, "Scott, you better go in, take a shower, and get yourself together." So when Lee came in, I said to him, "Lee, are you going to let him drive you out on the stage tonight? You're going to end up out in the audience."
Lee loved Scott and cared a great deal about Scott, but he also cared a great deal about this career, and it could be dangerous. He didn't want to do anything that would hurt his Liberace character, that character which he created.
Scott was out, evicted by force from Liberace's Los Angeles house, now on the street.
This is what I know about Lee. If someone hurt him and they were with him, close to him, they could never come back again, because they hurt him and that was the end of their relationship. Because many of them called me to say, if you get, even Scott called me up and he said, "Gladys, I will give you anything you ask for if you will get me back with Lee." And my answer was to him, I'm sorry, you blew it. And there's nothing I can do for you.
Scott would not go quietly. He sued for palimony, for years spent as Liberace's sexual, emotional, and business partner. Finally, the judge threw out the gay palimony demand, but a devastated Liberace furiously denied the charges and went on hiding the truth about himself.
In fact, everything this young man said has been proven to be a horrible lie. And there's a reason for him being a pathological liar. And the reason he was fired, because he was heavy into drugs. He not only used cocaine, but he distributed cocaine. And I couldn't have anybody in my company who did that sort of thing.
And yet, the publicity of the palimony case did something unexpected. Liberace discovered that all publicity is good publicity. He was no longer just a diamond-encrusted Las Vegas curiosity. Now, he was news again.
Liberace.
He took a risk. He decided to play Radio City Music Hall, one of America's most prestigious venues, in the heart of New York City, the viper's nest of metropolitan critics who had lambasted his act for 3 decades. This was Liberace maximum strength. And he smashed the box office records at Radio City.
Lee, we love you. We love you.
He had finessed the most unlikely double triumph. He had publicly fought to quash the suggestion he was homosexual, yet here he was, becoming a hip, gay icon.
In his comeback stage, just before the end of his life, he had a much broader appeal. People saw him as funny. I mean, he was able to poke fun at his own self, his own extravagance, you know, his costumes, his boas, his whole act just got more and more flamboyant, florid, and crazy in a way. But he certainly knew how to milk it for a buck.
And at Radio City Music Hall, I noticed the opening night he did a number in hot pants with the Rockettes. And when he came out in the hot pants, he always had huge football player legs. His legs were real thin and white. And he's coming through, and I hug him, and I notice that he's skin and bones.
It really didn't dawn on me that he had AIDS because he went on this watermelon diet. I never cut so many watermelons in my life. And that would be his dessert or his lunch. And he did lose 30 pounds from that diet. But then in the end, I could see that he was failing.
At the end of 1986, Liberace retreated to his house in the California desert resort of Palm Springs. At that time, AIDS was still a new disease, and the atmosphere around it was one of frenzy bordering on panic. In the wake of Rock Hudson's death at the end of the previous year, the press were eagerly in search of the next celebrity victim. Liberace's management issued fierce denials that he had AIDS.
Family and friends are gathered at his bedside. Liberace reportedly is suffering from anemia, complicated by emphysema and heart disease.
But it's in this very room where he actually died. At night, they used to have these huge cranes with long telescopic lens back and forth outside here, trying to get pictures of him lying in bed through the window. And he thought it was a big joke because it had them all tinted. And they said, look at the fools. They think they're going to get a picture of me like this.
Now, one thing mattered to Liberace, that the secrets of his sex life and his disease would go with him to the grave. He changed his will, cutting out his relatives and management, and leaving his fortune to his own foundation, to be spent on commemorating an untarnished legacy. The public face would be preserved to the last.
I didn't know he had a wig when I first came. It was a darn good one. However, as I was caring for him, I realized it was. But he was so concerned about keeping this wig on, even when he was sort of out of it. You know, not unconscious, but sleepy. Sometimes he'd touch like this And I said, it's okay, it's on, okay. When he died, it just sort of slipped off, and I put it back on for him. Said, oh, don't worry, Liberace, you're all right, you look good.
But in the days following Liberace's death, a bizarre drama was played out. As soon as Liberace had died, his body was taken from his house in Palm Springs, 120 miles across the desert, to a mortuary in Los Angeles for cremation. But the coroner responsible for Palm Springs wanted the body brought back. He wanted to find out if Liberace had died of AIDS. The chance to uncover a celebrity AIDS death on his patch was too big an opportunity for the coroner to miss. As word spread that the body was heading for an autopsy, the press sensed that all Liberace's secrets were about to be revealed. Interest became frenzied.
And of course, the press had helicopters flying over the hearse to make sure it got back from the mortuary. Just insulting.
It was like a circus. We had news media all over the place. We had to put a police line, one of those yellow police lines, do not cross all around the building. People were hiding in the bushes, trying to take pictures, crawling under the police line. We had over 2,300 telephone calls within 2 days from all over the world, not just locally, wanting to know the circumstances surrounding the death.
The thing that disturbed me was the way the coroner handled the matter. I felt like he was using it for political gain. Also, it was controversial. AIDS, gay, famous, world-famous entertainer. And he's a little nobody person that had his 15 seconds of fame. He must have done 8 or 9 press conferences.
So the announcement was made.
Liberace died from an opportunistic disease caused by AIDS. I was all of a sudden forced into the limelight, and it's a matter of ego, I guess. I didn't fear anything. I didn't, and I guess you could say I did enjoy the limelight because it made me world famous.
I wish that Lee's wishes could have been honored, that he could have gone and been cremated, and it would be nobody's business.
What Liberace had wanted was public admiration, recognition for his music, while his private life stayed private. But on a slab in the city morgue, the public persona Liberace had spent his life defending was finally stripped away. He would never have the lasting fame of Frank Sinatra or Elvis Presley. But Liberace's influence did not die with him.
I don't think he had a big influence on the world of music. I don't see a lot of Liberace CDs in the record stores. But he certainly made it all right to be a screaming queen on stage. He opened the door to give other performers a certain kind of liberty to be flamboyant.
Liberace, the performer, was far ahead of his time. His unacknowledged triumph was to prepare the way for the costumes and stunts of a generation of pop stars.
The moment we had seen the daring showmanship, the self-mockery, the costumes, the glitter, all of it must have gone, everybody, oh, that works. Television, immediately following Liberace's arrival, it brightened up a hell of a lot. guess you've got to say that after all those sad years from 1939 through to the mid-50s, it was Liberace who cracked open that particular golden egg.
Despite the houses and the jewels and the money in the bank, Liberace chose to keep on performing all his life. At the end of his career, he was an unlikely sex object for an even more unlikely audience. Yet Liberace and his fans made one another absurdly, deliriously happy. This was the true love affair of his life.
You really want more?
I think that's where he was the happiest, on stage. That's just what he loved to do. I mean, he was such a showman, and he was the happiest when he was performing.
I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's warm and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.